Hello, my name is Reverend Dejong. I'm the priest at the Belmont Zen Center in St. Clairsville, Ohio. We are getting ready at our center to welcome 3 new Buddhists to our community. In terms of, we have 3 folks who are getting ready to go through the formal process of becoming Buddhists, which involves taking the precepts, the 5 basic moral guidelines that the Buddhist tradition follows. And part of that is in our particular tradition, a kind of traditional gift that people are given when they take the precepts, is a mala. And I've come up with a way of making a mala that's a little non-traditional in Buddhism, but inspired by things that are done in other religious traditions. A mala, if you're not familiar with it, is just literally it means garland, reference to a flower garland. It's basically just a string of beads or something like that, traditionally 108, that allows someone to recite prayers or mantras or count prostrations or any number of different practices that they may do. It's just a way of focusing on the practice that you're doing and not have to worry about counting, right? So they're made out of a lot of things, but usually they're made out of beads, beads on a string. But there is a tradition in world's religions of making taking a cord and making knots. The specific inspiration that I'm drawing on here for this is the Christian Orthodox tradition of the komposkini or chotki in Russian, komposkini in Greek, prayer rope, usually 100 knots, 50 knots, 100 knots, up to 300 knots, 1,000 knots. They're most commonly used by monastics in the Orthodox religious tradition, but lay folks sometimes use them as well. So that's often made out of wool, kind of wool yarn, and they're tied into knots with a particular distinctive shape. For the same idea, a person could count a practice, count their prayers by using the knots. So that was the inspiration for this, was actually the Orthodox komposkini as an alternative way of making a mala for Buddhists to use. The inspiration, when I started researching this, the inspiration also in part came from a particular Catholic nun that I found a video of on YouTube showing how to make knotted rosaries, basically making a rosary, Roman Catholic rosary bead, decades and so on, which again usually made out of beads, but instead to make a knotted one. So I'm going to put a link in the description of this video on YouTube for folks who might want to take a look at her video, because specifically how to make the knots is something that I actually drew directly from her. Thank you, sister. Now the cord that I use is a nylon cord. I experimented with paracord, which is made out of polyester. And if you're familiar with paracord, it comes in 2 weights. And what I found was that the heavier weight is simply too thick, and the knots are huge, and it's too long, and it's just not very workable. The lighter weight is too floppy and flimsy, and the loops that you need to do to make the knots don't really hold their shape well, and it was just really an annoyance to work with. And this is the kind of cord that's more commonly used for those knotted Roman Catholic rosaries I was talking about. And in fact, I purchased this from a store that specializes in selling cord of a variety of different colors, as you're going to see as I go through here, a few examples. A variety of different colors specifically for making knotted rosaries with. So again, I'll give a link in the YouTube description for this video to the store where I actually buy this stuff. Might as well give them a little plug. So this is the cord that I'm working with. It's a twisted nylon cord. You can simply kind of warm it to melt it a little bit to seal up the ends, and that works pretty well. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do this. The knot that I use, I'm not the most dexterous person and handy with that kind of crafty stuff. So I experimented with different kinds of knots, and my fingers were just too dumb to make most of them, to be honest. So what I settled on was just a really simple kind of knot, what's called a barrel bead or barrel bead knot. It's a kind of a knot that just kind of, you end up with kind of a bead looking shape, right? And everything I'm going to show you how to do in this is just based on that one kind of knot. You don't have to learn different kinds of knots. It's just all this one kind of knot, right? So let me show you how to do this. To make this successfully, I discovered through trial and error and heartache, you need to start with 23 to 24 feet of the cord to make this work out the way I'm going to be demonstrating how to do it. I usually use 24 to be on the safe side. You could probably get away with 23, but it would be very frustrating and wasteful to be basically done and then realize you're a couple of inches short. So I'd rather err on the side of a little bit of generosity, and even if that means a little bit more waste, that's still better, I think. So I start with a 24-foot piece of the cord. I also found through trial and error that it's better to start in the middle and work your way toward both ends. So first thing to do is find, so I got both ends here, and I'm just going to go through until I find the middle of the cord, right? We're going to start in the middle, right? So right there's the center. So I'm going to grab it right where the center is. I'm going to work out one way and basically do, it's 108 knots, right? So we're going to do 54 going this way, and then when we're done with that, we'll do 54 going the other way. So let me demonstrate how to make the knot. I'm going to do this a couple of times with this view, and then I'll also add in what it looks like kind of a little more closer up so you can see a little more easily. But let me just kind of describe how it works. It's a really easy knot to make. It's a little bit fiddly when you first get started because you've got a lot of extra cord to deal with, and as you go through, it gets shorter, and then it's a little less slack to have to deal with. I'm going to demonstrate how to make the knot, and I'm going to do it in this view, which might be a little bit hard to see, but I'm going to describe what I'm doing, and then I'll film it again, kind of tighter and closer up, and watching my hands. So hopefully that'll help you figure out if you can't quite follow what I'm describing. So I'm holding the cord, again, right here's the center of the cord, right? So I got 12 feet on both sides. I'm going to work out from the center, and we're going to be going this way because I'm right-handed. So we're going this way. So I'm holding the cord between my thumb and middle finger because I'm going to kind of use my index finger, my pointy finger here to be my form to wrap the cord around. So I'm going to start with, I put the cord over my finger, and I'm going to make 3 loops going back toward my elbow, right? Sort of working backwards toward my hand. So 1, 2, 3. So I've now got 3 rings, right, of the cord, and you can see the, well, you can't see, I can see. What's in my left hand is going underneath of those loops, right? So now here's where the fiddly bit starts. I'm going to work those coils off my finger, but hold them together, right? And then I'm going to take the slack end here in the direction that I'm making the beads, what's in my right hand. I'm going to make just a little loop that I can use to feed that through those 3 coils, those 3 circles. And now I got to feed all the spare, this gets easier as you go along, all the spare cord has to come through that loop, right? Now, here's the part you have to be careful with. I now need to tighten this knot up. The knot's already formed. Now I just need to tighten it up. But the important thing is to keep the 3 coils kind of parallel to one another and not let them eat each other, because that's the tendency that they want to do, is they don't all get smaller at the same size. So as I take up the slack in the knot with my right hand, I'm also kind of keeping those 3 coils together and next to each other, kind of in parallel. And sometimes you have to kind of squeeze the loops to kind of keep them around the same size. So just gradually tighten up the knot, right? And again, as you get more used to doing this, this gets easier. It sounds a little fiddly, but it's really not that bad, right? So I now tighten up that knot, and there you can see, let me hold it where I got better contrast, right? There you can see the shape of the knot. It's a very kind of, it kind of looks like a barrel, hence the name, right? So now I just need to tighten that up, kind of pull it tight, right, to get it nice and snug. And you will get calluses, and you may get blisters if you do too much of this all in one day, but you'll get used to it. Or you can wrap a little, sometimes I wrap a little bandage tape around my fingers to just a little protection. So tighten that up very snugly, right? Another thing you can do that I do sometimes when my fingers get sore is to use the handle space of my scissors here, and I'll just kind of feed it through the handle and use the handle of my scissors to kind of hold the knot on the one end, right, and pull it even tighter, right? Because you want this really snug so it's not going to go anywhere, right? So there's my first knot. Now I just repeat that process 107 more times. So I'm going to, let me go through it again. I'm going to show you, because another important thing here is you want just enough space between the knots so that you can feel them, right? You can feel as you transition from one knot to the next, but not so much space that it becomes ridiculously long or it kind of looks silly. So being able to tighten up the knot against the previous knot and just leave the right gap is something that, again, takes a little bit of practice. So I'm going to do the same thing again, right? So holding between my thumb and middle finger, over my index finger, and then loop backwards towards my hand 3 times. And wait, I got that too far apart. Let me do it a little closer, because it's easier to tighten the knots up if you don't have too much space between them. So I've got my 3 loops. I make a little handle, so to speak, here. I feed that through the 3 loops. I pull all the spare cord through, right? And I'm going to do the same thing again to form that next knot. And again, I'm going to try to, if you can see, get just enough space in there that if you imagine using this as you're feeling it with your fingers, you need to be able to feel where you go from one knot to the next. And usually a good way to do this is you kind of have to work it both ways, right? Otherwise you may end up slamming the 2 knots up too close to one another, or kind of locking the knot in when you still have too wide of a gap, right? So you can see there, tighten that up really good. Right, so now you can see, hopefully you can see, right? I've got my 2 knots with just a little gap between them, right? So if you imagine, again, as you're using this, you'll be able to feel that space, but the gap is small enough that it's not going to create a kind of ridiculously long chain when you're done with the whole thing, right? So I'm going to do that one more time. So over my index finger, 3 loops back toward my hand, whoops. Try that again. Over my index finger, 3 loops back toward my hand, slide the loops off, make a little handle, feed it through the hole, pull all the slack through. And now again, I'm going to tighten that knot up while kind of have a little squeeze on the loops to keep the loops around the same size, right? So again, kind of work it back and forth with your fingers to tighten up the slack, pull the slack through the knot, but keep the space what you want it to be between the knots. Pull it nice and tight. And there's our 3 knots. So we've got a good start, right? There's our first 3 knots. Okay, let me show you one more time how to make these knots. Hopefully this will be a useful view for you to see if you're still having a little trouble understanding my description, right? So you hear the 3 I've already done, right? So again, I'm going to hold between my thumb and middle finger here, over my index finger, right? Now I'm going to make 3 loops, 1, 2, 3, back toward my hand. All right, now I'm going to wiggle those loops off of there, I'm holding between my pointer finger and my thumb now so that the 3 loops stay where I want them to be. Make a little handle, right? Feed that up from behind through the loops, pull all the slack through. All right, now I'm going to tighten up the loops. Keeping, as you can see, I've still got the 3 loops there. The fiddly bit here is to not have one loop get bigger and try to eat the other two. So I'm gonna tighten that up, right? So now you can see, now I just need to tighten that up a lot more, obviously. So that's how the knots are formed. Now, what I often do, what I usually do, to make it easier later on, especially if you're not going to do this all in one sitting, which I don't recommend because your fingers will get sore. If you're going to kind of stop and start with this, it's helpful to be able to know where your center was, because as you go along, you don't want to have to count all the knots to figure out which end is which, and especially as you get closer to being done. So what I usually do is just take a little safety pin, I got a little tiny safety pin, and just put it through the cord right next to that knot, the first knot I made, right in the center of the cord, right? And now the center of the cord is marked, so later on it's a lot easier to tell where the center was. You can't put the safety pin in before you start, because then it's in the way, or at least that's what I find. So I do a couple of knots so it's out of the way, and then I'll add the safety pin. And now it's just a question of continuing to make knots again, going all the way this way until we have 54 done on this side, right? And then I'm going to switch here now, because I've got one, like a good TV chef, I've got one that's partway made. So here you can see one I've already done in gray, right? And here's my little safety pin, because here's the 54 knots, right, going that way. And you can see the slack that I have left. I'm only down to that much, right? I went from 12 feet to having that much slack left. But now I've got 12 feet going the other way, because I'm only halfway done, right? So now what I'll do to finish this one is go through the same process from the middle out, working the other way. So I'll just do one here, right? So again, over the index finger, 3 loops back toward the hand, pull the loop off, make a little handle, feed it through the loops, pull all that slack through, and now we can tighten up that knot right up against the safety pin, right? Again, we'll work the knot back and forth to have a just barely big enough gap between. So there's that knot. So now, again, 53 more, and I'll be done going this way, right? And I'll have all my 108 knots for the mala done. For the, obviously it won't be tied together. That'll just be the main body of the mala, right? Now, here's one. This is actually one of the ones I'm making for my future dharmakaris, my students, right? So here's one that's got all 108 beads done in red. You can see Taego red. I'm with the Korean Buddhist Taego order, and we use a lot of red. So these are red for them. So I've got 108 beads done, right? You can see that, but it's not connected yet, right? So I still got the 2 loose bits. So there you can see the slack that I've got left, right? Some of which we're going to use up now in the process of doing the finishing part, right? So I experimented around with different kinds of knots. And again, I'm not very dexterous and good at this kind of stuff, actually. So I wasn't very successful at making kind of bigger, fancier kinds of knots to connect the 2 loose ends together. So what I came up with eventually was basically just doing the same barrel knot, the exact same knot, on either of the strands, but running the other strand through the middle of the knot as you're doing it. And by doing that, you kind of make 2 knots that lock each other together, right? So that you end up with what looks like one long knot, as you can see right there. It kind of looks like one long knot, but it's actually just 2 barrel knots that are kind of pushing up against one another, so it kind of locks them together, right? You're welcome to find a fancy way to do that if you want, but that's what I was able to get done. And that's what I find works well. So we're going to do the exact same thing with making the barrel knots, except that I'm going to run the other strand through the middle of each knot, right? So you can see I've got both strands here together. I'm going to hold them together, right? So now I'm going to make a knot with the one strand, but wrapped around the other strand. So I'm running the strand I'm going to leave loose. I'm running down my finger so that as I make my loops, it's that other strand is inside the loops. Now again, this gets a little bit harder to do because now you have this extra bit of stuff in the way, right? So again, I'm going to make myself a little handle and feed it through those 3 loops and pull the slack through. And now, as I form my knot, again, I'm kind of running the knot along that other strand, right, and forming the knot. Now here you probably want to leave a little bit more slack so that there's a little space next to where the other knots are, right? So now I pull that one tight. Okay, so now you can see I've got the 2 ends held together, but now what I'm going to want to do, so I just made the knot, see now I've got a shorter one and a longer one, right? Because I just made the knot in this one. So I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to make the knot in the other cord running around the cord that I made the first knot in. So I'm going to end up with 2 barrel knots right next to each other. So again, over my finger, make 3 loops, pull them off carefully, make a little handle, feed it through the middle. Now I'm going to start to pull that one tight. Now obviously in this case I want the 2 knots right up against each other. Right, so again, you can see I'm kind of gradually working the slack out of the knot. And now I can just pull it right up against the other one. So now you can see, let me do this again. I've got my 2 barrel knots there locked right up against one another, right? So that it just kind of looks like one big long knot, okay? Now, to finish the ends, what I usually do to, obviously we don't want all of this, right? Is to just make 3 small barrel knots, maybe with just 2 loops down each side, right? Buddhists like things in 3s, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the teacher, the teachings, and the path that we all follow together. So 3 little knots to conclude this. So I'm going to do this separately on either of the 2 ends here. So this time, again, over my finger, around, but this time just twice, right? We're going to make kind of a half-size barrel bead. Again, a little handle, feed it through, work the loops back. These are a lot easier, obviously, since you only have 2 loops to deal with. Probably leave, again, a little bit more slack here, right, for aesthetic's sake, right? So again, I'm going to tighten that loop up, or that knot up. All right, so there you can see, and I'll do the same thing again. Over 1, 2 loops. Force of habit, I made 3. Add another knot. Again, leave a little gap between the knots. Maybe 1/4 inch or so, compared to, no more than 1/8 of an inch between the knots that are up the string, probably more like a 1/16, just enough to be able to feel that difference. So there's my second knot. I'll do the third one. Again, 2 loops, not 3, feed up through. Tighten that one up. Again, try to leave about the same space as the gap between them. Tighten that up. The last one especially needs to be nice and snug. Right, so now I've got 3 kind of half-size loops on that side. Now I'll repeat that process in the other side. So I end up with 3 knots down either end. Okay, so now, as you can see, hopefully, I've got 3 kind of half-sized 2-loop barrel beads going down each of my slack ends here, right? So now all this excess I can just trim off, leaving a 1/4 inch or so of cord there, right, out from that last knot. Okay, so first of all, let me show you. Remember, we started with 24 feet, right? And all I have left is that, right? So that's probably, what's that look like? I don't know, maybe about 16 inches or so total, right? So you could see if I'd used 23 feet instead of 24 feet, I'd been cutting it pretty close, right? So if you're brave, maybe use 23 feet. But I'm want to be sure I don't run out, so I start with 24 feet. That's the reason why. So there's all the extra that's left. So that's the only kind of waste, unless you can come up with something else to do with those little short bits. So now, so we're not left with these fuzzy ends, and to kind of lock the bead, that final knot in place, you just take a little lighter, right, or candle flame, any kind of flame, and just warm that up a little bit. It's hard to do this while you're talking and blowing the flame. Don't catch it on fire, just kind of melt it, right? The nylon will melt into a little, just kind of seals the end, and that locks that last knot in place as well. So obviously do that on both sides. A little at a time is better. If you leave the flame on it too long, it very well may catch on fire. We don't want that because it's bad for the bead, and it also makes noxious fumes, so let's avoid that. So there you can see, there's the completed mala, right? 108 beads, right? We've got kind of a guru bead. The double knot there is kind of the guru bead, where the 2 joints, or the 2 sides come together, 3 little individual knots there at the end for Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha to complete the strands, right? And again, just enough space between the beads that as you're kind of working through the beads, you can feel where those gaps are, right, as you're kind of feeding them through your fingers, but not so long that it's kind of ridiculously long. So you can see if you wear it this way, right, it works, or you can wear it around your wrist, depending on the size of your hand and how to go through. For me, this makes 5 loops. Right? Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dhamma, homage to the Sangha. Gatte, gatte, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. And there we have a completed 108 bead mala. Again, I have no possession of this design. You're welcome to use this. You're welcome to modify it. I hope that it's inspirational to you. I hope that creating malas of this sort will facilitate your practice and the practice of others to whom you may give them as gifts. I hope that was useful. Again, I'll put some links in the description of the video if you're watching this on YouTube, so you can see a little more information about how to make the knots, and about where you can find this kind of cord, or at least one source where you can find this kind of cord, so you can refer to those. Thank you very much.